In this video, we're going to talk about the downsides or the dark sides of being a programmer. I think it's important to understand that no matter what career path or what path you go down in life in general, you're always going to have to do things that you don't want to do. There's a saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That's been hammered into my brain by a million different people. And while I think there's a good sentiment behind that saying, I also believe it's kind of BS. Because at the end of the day, life is about trade-offs and sacrifices. And the question is, what are you willing to trade off? What are you willing to sacrifice? No matter what you do, you're going to have to do the things that you don't want to do the things that you want to do. But with that being said, what I consider an upside to being a programmer, being in the tech industry, you may consider a downside and vice versa. Now, I don't want this video to only be about the dark sides of being in the tech industry. I kind of want to paint the full picture. So let's go ahead and talk about the pros and why I choose to be a programmer day after day, and really that boils down to one thing. When I write code, I'm able to get into a flow state. I always knew about this idea, but I wasn't really able to put it into words until I read this book, Flow, recommended by one of my managers when we were talking about this concept. Anyways, in this book, there's this graph where the x-axis is skill and the y-axis is challenge, and essentially there is this channel in the middle where there has to be a nearly perfect match of skill and challenge to get into this flow state, or what the author calls a flow state. If the skill is too high and there isn't a challenge, you'll be very bored. Now, you've probably experienced this. I certainly have. I've worked jobs where it feels like the day is dragging on and it feels like time is moving in slow motion. But on the flip side, if there is a lack of skill and the challenge is too high, that's where the anxiety and the stress kind of sets in, and that work is deemed too stressful. Now, when I'm coding, and quite frankly, when I was learning how to code, I was able to easily kind of snap into this flow state where it felt like time didn't really exist, and I wasn't really focused on anything else but the challenge that was at hand. And this is kind of how it is for me most of the time. Now, I say most of the time because obviously it's not perfect. There are still the days that seem like they just drag on. And then there are the days where I'm working on something and it's extremely stressful. It's a high stress environment. But, at least 50% of the time, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on the day, I'm able to snap into this flow state. And it's really why I choose to be a programmer. It's why I love this career path. My day doesn't feel like it's dragging on. And that's really important to me. I know what it feels like to work at a job where it feels like the day is just never going to end. Now, coding isn't the only thing that I am able to channel this energy into. It happens with YouTube. It happens with the gym. Once you kind of learn about this flow state, you can really channel it into other avenues of your life and even find the joy in the things that you don't necessarily want to be doing. I think this book does a pretty good job explaining that if you want to check it out. Now let's go ahead and talk about the dark sides. But before we do that, first I got to give a huge thank you to the sponsor of today's video, which is Mailgun. So Mailgun is the leading email delivery service for businesses around the world. It's used by companies such as Lyft, Microsoft, and Wikipedia. Mailgun is great because it's built with an API-first focus, meaning that it's really built for developers. Mailgun is how modern companies work with email. The platform's ease of use, world-class support, and powerful APIs empower smart development teams to reach real customers at scale with a data-driven approach so that their organizations can grow faster. With Mailgun, you can send and track your transactional and marketing messages effortlessly, prevent fake signups, and remove invalid email addresses from your list quickly. You can even partner with email experts to improve your email deliverability and drive higher conversion rates. So if all this sounds interesting to you, make sure you use my link, mailgun.com/Kenny, to try Mailgun today. Big thank you to Mailgun for sponsoring this video. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the dark side of being a programmer. All right, so number one, and I wanted to start with this one because I don't see it as a huge con. I just know it may not be for everyone, but it's the idea or the fact that you never really stop learning in this career path. With new tech constantly hitting the market, it can seem pretty overwhelming to always stay caught up. Not only do you have to stay up to date with new tools, languages, and frameworks, you constantly kind of have to refresh your brain with old concepts that you may have forgotten about. Tech changes rapidly, and you definitely need to be aware of what's happening in your domain. Now, obviously, you don't have to know everything about everything, but staying up to date on what's happening in your specific domain, for example, maybe that's iOS development or native Android development, is pretty important. Ideally, you should be learning on the job, but when you start working professionally, you may just not have time to always be learning new things on the job because you're going to be busy making new features, fixing bugs, working through technical debt, so on and so forth. And at some point, learning new things may dip into your time outside of your job. So the next thing, and you knew it was going to be on this list, is the dreaded coding interview. While there is a ton of opportunity in tech, the interview process, it sucks. Being tested on arbitrary knowledge or working through coding puzzles that don't really reflect the job, they suck. But it is what it is. You can be very prepared for coding interviews, study a lot of data structures and algorithms, a lot of leak code problems, but come across a question that you just don't know how to solve, and then you bomb the interview. Even for these top-tier FANG jobs, these top-tier manga big tech jobs, you can study for months and months and even still not be fully prepared for the coding interview. However, the coding interview is a bit easier for non-big tech or non-tech companies in general, but even still, preparing for an interview can definitely take a good amount of time. And depending on your situation and your experience, preparing for a programming interview can kind of be a full-time job itself. For example, if you have no experience, you got to build a portfolio, you got to work on coding challenges. You have to apply to, countless jobs, maybe upwards of hundreds of jobs. You got to go through multiple different interviews and tweak and refine until you can get that first job. However, it does get easier with experience and time. Okay, so the next downside I want to talk about is the hustle. Being in tech, and honestly just in life in general, there's an overwhelming urge to be successful. You never really feel like you're doing enough, and there is honestly just a lot of comparison in the tech industry. I've been using Blind a lot lately, which is an app where you can anonymously sign up under your company email and talk about work and whatever you want really in secrecy, and it's used a lot by tech workers, and the people on this app will make you feel like if you're not making at least $300K a year in the tech industry, then you're a failure. Now, I actually like Blind a lot. While there are, egotistical tech bros on there, there's an equal amount of people who are willing to help, who've been in your shoes and want to help you get to where they are. Now, to be honest, there's a lot of comparison in the tech industry, a lot of egotistical know-it-all programmers. But to be clear, I'm not like anti-hustle culture. I know that it's just not for everybody. I think Teddy Roosevelt said, comparison is the thief of joy. I know comparison can be pretty draining, but at the same time, it can kind of push you to become the best version of yourself. If I didn't have people more successful than me, I wouldn't have a clear idea of where I want to be one day. So anyways, that's really it. Don't get me wrong. I think the pros massively outweigh the downsides of the tech industry. I love this career path. And while there are the egotistical tech bros, I've met some of the coolest people ever who are in the industry. And, I know it gets said a lot, especially by tech YouTubers, but learning how to code was definitely one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my life. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.